So this and in the Torah portion, as we're going to read now, we'll bring it up. We're going to do a snapshot of traces of the Torah reading. God speaks to Moses and tells Moses, go to Pharaoh and demand to let my people go. Let's just look at the Parsha overview. It's on page 2 in the books. The children of Israel multiply in Egypt. Threatened by their growing numbers, Pharaoh enslaves them and orders the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, to kill all male babies at birth. When they do not comply, he commands his people to cast the Hebrew babies into the Nile. A child is born to Yocheved, the daughter of Levi, and her husband Amram. This baby is placed in a basket on the river, while the baby's sister Miriam stands watch from afar. Pharaoh's daughter discovers the boy, raises him as her son, and names him Moses. So Moses grows up as the adoptive grandson of the Pharaoh, the cruel oppressor of his people. As a young man, Moses leaves the palace and discovers the hardship of his people. He sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew and kills the Egyptian. The next day, he sees two Jews fighting. When he admonishes them, they reveal his deed of the previous day, and Moses is forced to flee to Midian. There, he rescues Jethro's daughter, marries one of them, Zipporah, and becomes a shepherd of his father-in-law's flocks. God appears to Moses in a burning bush at the foot of Mount Sinai, instructs him to go to Pharaoh and demand, let my people go so they may serve me. Moses' brother Aaron is appointed to serve as his spokesman. In Egypt, Moses and Aaron assembled the elders of Israel to tell them that the time of their redemption has come. The people believe them, but Pharaoh refuses to let them go and even intensifies the suffering of Israel. Moses returns to God to protest. Why have you done evil to this people? And God promises that the redemption is close at hand, and that's how this week's Torah portion ends.
I saw the movie technically. Why did Pharaoh Moses is it Egyptian name or is it a Hebrew?
There is a debate. It seems that it is an Egyptian name. Moses was given a Hebrew name. Tovia was his Hebrew name, and Moshe he was named by Pharaoh's daughter. That's what it says clearly in the scripture.
And he was given knowledge that he was Hebrew.
Hebrew. We're not 100% sure when that happened, but there's some debate about that. But as a child, he definitely grew up in an Egyptian home. Okay. Now, the like we've been doing in this course, we're going to not talk about this story is full of things we can discuss, but here we pick one morsel of the story, which isn't necessarily the larger story, but to use that as a portal to go into a larger topic, which isn't necessarily on on the face of it the topic of the Torah portion, but it's an important topic for us as Jews. And the topic we're going to be talking about today is the eternal nature of the Jewish people. And what does that mean? Is that real? Is it because we've survived? And many of you may have read, Mark Twain wrote in the late 1800s something for Harper's Magazine about, and the question is, what is the secret of the immortality of the Jew? Because we really don't, following normal anthropological principles, we should have been gone long ago. And there are also many different anecdotal quotes from people over millennia, non-Jewish leaders saying, why can't we stamp out these people? We just keep on bouncing back. Yeah, and we keep bouncing back, right? So is that what we call ourselves eternal? Because history proves it to be eternal? Or have we made it through history because of something beyond what we experience? There is an objective quality of the eternal nature of the Jew. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about it because there's something interesting about Moses in the way the Torah describes him. And because we have different great patriarchs, matriarchs, the Torah describes about the different, what we're going to call spiritual masters and very important historical figures of the Jewish people. There's something a little different about Moses. And we want to understand Moses a little bit more. And so we can understand ourselves. So I'm going to go. Let me do this. Here's a graphic. Now, this is something you see a picture. That's a picture of an Israeli soldier on some kind of on a an army vehicle, but he's wearing talis and tefillin. And I guess since October 3rd, before October 3rd also, but probably more globally, since October 3rd, there are many different images we have of IDF soldiers, people putting themselves very much in the place of danger to protect our land and our people. And there's as difficult a time as we've been going through, there's been a coming together more than usual of Jews in saying we have to survive. And the language that has been used a lot is in he lately, probably since October 7th, is Am HaNetzach. Am HaNetzach would translate as an eternal nation. And that the Jews, telling ourselves and telling each other is that history, as much as we're in a tough spot now, and many times feels like the whole world is against us. We know from history that we will persevere, we will survive because we are Am HaNetzach. History has shown us very, very difficult times, and we really don't want to go back to that. But we always survive. We are what we call Am HaNetzach. So we can say, well, that's been the experience. We say, but is there an ingredient that actually makes us an Am HaNetzach? This first text is from the first um, the first chief rabbi of the modern state of Israel, Rabbi Avram Yitzchak Cohen Koch. And he was prolific and he was a great leader. And this is a translation on text one of a piece that he wrote. Jacob, meaning us, we are Jacob, strides forward with pride and winds the tendrils of righteousness as his spirit rises across the world. He hears the ticking of hours and moments with a sense of perpetuity and eternity. He journeys onward with eternal strength and forges the floods of waves and flow of time. Days of sorrow, like a multitude of water, never frighten him. He knows their force is merely passing, while he derives strength, eternity, and splendor from the source of all existence. With God's might, Jacob will be returned, and those who perished resurrected. His eternity will overcome the fleeting moments that coalesce into days and weeks and pull in the well springs of eternity, the supernal sea of freedom. Now, understand, he's writing this, post-Holocaust, but there is that feeling of we will persevere, we will succeed, we will survive. So now, let's go to something in our Torah portion. So here's there's a graphic. Do you believe we are an eternal, immortal nation? If yes, by what merit do we deserve this? And we have here a picture also it's of these soldiers that's always going there. They're saying the Shema, they're praying. This is there is very much this idea of, and I have nephews in the IDF. It's that we're not the Israeli army, we're the Jewish army. We're not only protecting Israel, we're protecting the Jewish people. We're the front line to protect the Jewish people. So the IDF is not an observant group of people. But first of all, some observant people go into the IDF. But the main thing is that it seems that even the quote unquote non-observant get swept up with the idea that this is not just about having a homeland or defending a specific land. It's about Judaism and the Jewish people and a history. Thank you, Dr. Carlos. Okay. So text two is about Moses on page 5. And the Torah tells us an interesting thing about Moses' birth. We have a little bit, we know when Isaac was born, we know when Jacob was born. We're not told too much about it. There's something unique about Moses' birth, is that when it says that he was born, it says uh, the the language of the Torah. It's this week in this week's Torah portion is Moses was born and they saw that he was good. Looking at him, they saw that he was good. So the Talmud tells us, what does it mean they saw that he was good? Page 5. The moment Moses was born, the statement of the Talmud is that the entire home where he was born filled with light. How do we know this? We know this from a juxtaposition of two passages. One verse states, his mother, saw that Moses was good. And another verse states, also seeing it was good, saw that the light was good. So they were able to see light. In other words, not only luminescence from the spiritual light, spiritual clarity. There was something luminescent, spiritually luminescent coming from this baby, from the moment of birth. Now, this is really the backdrop of this whole conversation, not so much about Moses, but about us. But thinking about it, from the moment of birth, morally, no one's really good. There's the Torah. There are quotes in the scripture saying that in a way the day of death has a greater quality than the day of birth, because the day of birth there's all uncertainty. How are we going to spend this life? And as we go through life, we have so many years in the tank of the things we did. The things we did were good. The mistakes we made, we try to repair them, but it's no longer that uncertainty. And with a baby, by definition, there's uncertainty. We're happy the baby's here. It's a beautiful gift to the world, but it's and the Medrash has they don't bring it, but the Medrash has a metaphor of when people are going out on an ocean voyage and they say bon voyage and they're celebrating. So they celebrate more when they reach dock safely, because going into the uncertainty, it may be exciting, but there's uncertainty in life. And usually, by the book, when we have a baby, we're very happy, but there's still so much uncertainty. What moral choices is baby going to make on the journey through life? Yet we say at birth, Moses wasn't making any decisions then, is already filled with light, which is very off the run, different than we find usually in Torah literature. So now let's get into this a little bit. I want to get into before I get we're going to talk about the nature of truth, because Moses, as we'll see, Moses is called the emblematic of truth. Moses and truth are synonymous. So what is truth? Let's get a little bit into truth. The nature of truth over falsehood. 6. The Talmud makes a statement. The evil empire flourishes when Jews hurl the Torah to the ground. When we neglect our own Torah, that's when evil flourishes. And then the Talmud asks, what's the source for that? There's a verse in Daniel that says, you cast truth to the ground and it will do and prosper. When truth is cast to the ground, and we call it truth of Torah, Torah Emes, the Torah is called the truth. And we say truth can only refer to the Torah. It says only. The truth in this definition only refers to Torah, as it is written by truth and never sell wisdom, ethics, and understanding. So Torah is synonymous with truth. And when we're not connected to truth, evil flourishes. What does all this mean? So let's figure out what's not truth. Does that mean the rest of the world is a lie? So let's take a look at what this means. Text 4, page 7. This rabbi of the 1800s says the world is called a fraudulent world. In rabbinic literature, our world is called a world of fraud. What does that mean? There's truth too, but what dominates is how we seem, often over who we are. It's what we present. it's not so much about the authenticity, it's about what you can accomplish or how many toys you can get. So this is a world which certainly has truth in it, but there's so many layers in each of us. And so many the conversations. Just look at what goes on in the world. There's so many layers of ego, of shallowness, of sizzle that's not steak. That a dominant force in this world is how things appear, not how they are. And that's what we call it fraudulent world. It's maybe a sharp word for it, but in other words, the world doesn't show its true nature easily. And now he says something else. Falsehood is another name for things that are transient. In other words, subject to termination. So here is a Torah definition of truth, which probably doesn't spring to mind immediately. That's something that is only transient. It exists, but we feel there's a certain sense of it exists for now. If I'm a kid in fourth or fifth grade, and and we have a substitute, you take it a little less seriously because he's here today, gone tomorrow, right? That's the way we did it. My teacher is here for the year. I got to take more seriously. My principal, who's going to be the next year too, even when I'm with another teacher, you take it even more seriously because the more transient something is, the less seriously we take it. And the more we search for, whether in relationships or in life, is if there's anything that has permanence. So in one of the what Maimonides, they don't bring it here, but when he in his book of laws, when he starts off by talking about God as the absolute truth, who's not dependent on anything. Because when someone is dependent on something, then their permanence is in question. Because if they're being propped up by something, and that thing fails, then they failed. They're being propped up. So in our existence, really, there's no such thing as an absolute truth, as Maimonides said, except for God, because God depends on nothing. So, but there's a scale, there's a continuum of is there such thing as true immortality, something that's forever, or then within non-forever, then there are things where we consciously or not, we sense a difference between flash in the pan, just a meeting here today, gone tomorrow, or something more substantive, which is enduring. So just to again, text 4, it says the world is called a fraudulent world. For falsehood is another name for things that are transient. In other words, subject to termination. All worldly delights are transient, as it is written, for the time of death, one cannot take everything. You think about it in life. If I'm investing in a relationship that I hope is long term for my lifetime, it's not immortal, or maybe it is immortal, at least when it doesn't feel immortal, but it's long term. Investing in dinner, it's here, and tomorrow maybe it's a memory, it's gone. We need it, but some of the things have more substance, more durability, and we should take them more seriously over the things which are here today, gone tomorrow. Actually, just popped into my mind years ago. I was asked to go visit a very prominent attorney in this state. I'm not going to mention the name, but it was very, very prominent. I actually didn't realize he was Jewish. The name didn't strike me as particularly Jewish, but he was. And he was on his deathbed, and someone asked me if I would go visit him. I would go visit him, and I walked into his house, the room he was in, and his room, the walls were adorned with different pictures of this gentleman with celebrities and world leaders from all over the world. Very impressive. And I must have been in my early 30s, and I don't know if this was the smartest thing to say or not, but I had never met the guy. When I sat down to talk to him, I said, "This is very impressive." And he looked at me and he said, "Yeah, but what does it mean now?" Like, you're saying right now, I'm at this stage. What does it do for me? It's the transience. So, and that's the point of Rabbi Tzadok Cohen, this rabbi they were quoting in text for. The Proverbs say, text 5a, along these lines, a true tongue will be established forever, but a lying tongue just for a moment. It's when we're saying something true, authentic, it has, if it's authentic, that's what I mean, then hopefully I'm going to stick with it. But if we say just what someone wants to hear at this moment, that's in and out. It's really it's not a substantive thing. So either it has its effect, it doesn't have its effect. It's not even really. That's why it's a good thing about telling the truth is you don't have to remember everything you said because it's in and out of our own ears. Text 5b. This is a rabbi from medieval times. Was a great rabbi, a great mathematician. Says something true will always be correct and proper. It cannot be reversed at any point. Or something false can happen to exist for a little while, but it is fleeting. It can't last long. I guess if you want to take a simple example, 2 + 2 = 4, no matter the language, no matter the society, no matter, it's a reality. It's a truth. What we might say if 10 years ago I could have said to you, and I would have said to you if it came up, and I don't know if I did say to you that we've made so much progress in tamping down anti-Semitism, and it's not gone, but this is we're at a golden age of history. I would have thought that's a true statement 10 years ago. Maybe it was, but it's not anymore because things change. 2 + 2 doesn't change. 2 + 2 = 4 doesn't change. Other truths for the moment can be true, and then as conditions change, the veracity of a statement or the desire to even make that statement will change. Could change. So let's go to 6a.
So is that the
Yeah.
only thing constant change?
Changes, that's been said, that change is the only constant. But as a Jew, I would say the only constant is God. And then in our world, yeah. Now we want to have, Jonathan, I think what we're saying though is that within that changing world in which we exist, we want to try and give as much permanence as possible. Like, you know, we look at a relationship and say, here's a friendship, Karen, there's a friendship that this is just gonna make it no matter what. We're always gonna be. And then some of them they're out. Life is full of that. But hopefully we have some where we're investing and say it's not eternal as far as I can see, but it's for my purposes, it's unbreakable. And that's more in the micro. In the macro, we say God is eternal. And if I believe, and we have a soul, so we believe the soul is eternal because it's part of God. And that's kind of where we're going.
So going back to
Yeah.
the lie.
Yeah.
So things are transient. All things are transient. That's Hashem, right?
Correct.
So,
but I guess there's transient and there's really transient. There's if I 10, 15, 20 years ago, if I would sit here and say that what I hear about the hookup culture, if I think that's what it's called, say that's really not good for society and for relationships, I would probably be dismissed as what's a guy looking like this gonna say? Of course he says that because I'm a prude. I just read last week about studies of specifically women who just I'm not going to do that, not because of religious reasons, because I don't want to be used. It's dehumanizing. But what is that? It's here today, not gone tomorrow. That's not a relationship. So even if that's not eternal, there's like really transients that say it's a puff of smoke. Okay. So now let's, in this idea of understanding truth, let's look at an interesting um, quote of the Talmud. Rav Katina said, right now we're in the year 5786 on the Jewish calendar. And the Talmud says, Rav Katina said, the world will exist for 6,000 years. In other words, our world doesn't have much, has now, it's 214 years max, followed by destruction. As it is written, God will be exalted in the lumber that day. And that doesn't sound too great. And it sounds like the world isn't real because it's going to be destroyed. It's not, it's only temporary. So this great Sephardic rabbi of Iraqi rabbi writes that this doesn't mean that there will be destruction and desolation, God forbid. Rather, the natural law that will prevail for 6,000 years will end, because that's in truth, it, that's not the authentic reality. What we see as nature is really a distortion of reality. This is God's world, and it looks like an independent world. It will be replaced by a new, much improved, beautiful environment with no negative properties. There will be no grief, moaning, suffering, or negativity. Instead, we will enjoy only goodness and wonderful, healthy delights. When we talk about the maximum of 6,000 years, we talk about the Messiah, the Mashiach, to usher in a world today of only goodness. What does that mean? That the distortion of the world we see, the world, the world, the shallow, painful world we see is a distortion of God's reality. Because this is God's world, and there's godliness coursing through the world. And because of the veil that God put up, and because of our own actions, that goodness and godliness is hidden. And our job is to bring out the world's latent godliness, and the more it's actualized, the better the world is. And when Mashiach comes, that's an actualization of the good. And all of a sudden, I look at that tree and I see the purpose of the tree. Not only what it can do for me, why God created the tree, what the tree does, adds to the world. And we see each other, not only by, how we look and how we look different, but we see the goodness and what each of us brings to the world, because we're all on the same team, and that we all have souls and these will shine forth. But that's the idea of the goodness shining forth, and what means the less authentic presentation fades away. Yeah. No, okay, yeah, I understand. No, but that's different.
In this specific passage,
Doesn't say. Yeah, no, but it is. There's no question. That's exactly what it's talking.
Is it possible that Mashiach will not come in the next 214 years?
No.
It's not possible. Why
And you know, I know I can. First of all, I believe that. Second of all, it's easy for me. I can tell you that because this is we're both not true existences in that way, and you're not going to be able to prove me wrong in any way.
But why is Mashiach waiting until the last moment? So,
Excellent question. Excellent question.
Because of us, we were all.
No, I think you have to. You can ask me the question, and you can pivot and go to talk to God and ask him the question. I think God's waiting to hear that question from you. Why are you waiting so long?
Is he going to answer personal for me?
Listen, you never know. Listen, be open to answers.
I think that's the question.
Ask again.
So there's a date stamp.
Yes, Max.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And the 6,000 years.
What?
6,000 years. What was the point of time and 6,000 years time stuff?
The divinely orchestrated Big Bang. Okay. 7A. What? Listen, someone made them, right? The one eternal thing. 7A. This is my mind is. Maimonides tells us about the Torah. It is clear and explicit in the Torah that the commandments remain forever without change, subtraction, or addition. In Jewish thinking, God is the only truly eternal thing. Since God gave us the Torah and the language, which they don't bring here, the language of the Talmud is that God invested God's own soul in the Torah. So just as God is eternal, the Torah is eternal. Just as God is eternal, our souls are eternal. But here we're talking about the Torah. The Torah is eternal. And that's one of the reasons that the Torah says you cannot add new mitzvahs and you can't subtract mitzvahs. The mitzvahs are static. It's 613 mitzvahs, 248 positive, 365 negatives. Now, rabbis are told by the Torah to enact legislation of various things. They're not official mitzvahs. They're called rabbinic enactments, rabbinic mitzvahs, rabbinic guidance. But the mitzvahs of the Torah are those 613, 248, and 365. And one of the fundamentals of the Maimonides puts us 13 principles of faith is that the Torah does not change. Why? Because the Torah is the truth. It's yeah.
But aren't there some of those 613 mitzvahs that we no longer do?
We don't do because conditions change. Conditions change. So
isn't
for
that a subtraction?
no, it's a mitzvah, but I can't do it. So, for example, what happens if? It's a great question, friends. There's a mitzvah of a mezuzah. What if I live? If I travel, I live in hotels. I don't own a house.
One up every time you show up.
I don't have to. No, it's only if you're living in a place for more than 30 days. So unless I got one of those, but the idea is there's some of them are situational, right? If I have to circumcise my male son. What if I never had a son? It's a mitzvah. I just didn't do it. It didn't apply to me. It didn't attach to me, but it's a mitzvah. The mitzvahs we don't do are largely ones centered around the temple and Israel. So it's not that they're not mitzvahs anymore. We can't do them anymore. When we can, we will. But the mitzvahs are viable. There's no mitzvah we say off the charts. It's off the charts. It's not off, but I can't do them necessarily.
They're installed.
What?
They're installed.
They're in stone. They're in stone. They're in stone. They are in stone. Yeah, but and they're right now they're in limbo, waiting for us to be able to. Okay. Now, if you look at section 7b, this is a great rabbi who was a great rabbi who lived through the Spanish Inquisition. He wrote a lot of what we know about the Spanish Inquisition from his writings, what he went through, the pain and what was done to them. And he writes, he has his commentary on the scripture, and he has a book on philosophy, and this is quoted from there. The divine Torah is that in our hands is eternal and cannot change at any time. The same Torah scroll we take out every Saturday is the same Torah scroll he had there in Portugal and Spain. And he said that is its lessons and the same Talmud we were studying, and the lessons are eternal. This is because the blessed God created it according to God's unlimited wisdom. The Torah is relevant to every person at every time because God's knowledge is not limited to any particular time frame. Okay. So Torah, we want to follow the theme here. We wanted to talk about the eternal nature, if there's an eternal nature, and we believe there is, of the Jewish nation. So we put that question to the side, on hold, and we started looking at Torah. Say Torah is synonymous with truth. God is truth, and truth means immutable, not transient, and Torah is immutable, not transient. Now, we started also with Moses. We haven't gotten back to Moses yet, but we're going to. Who brought us the Torah? Who's the person who the Torah itself identifies with the Torah? Moses. One of something we say every morning, and that what that is a verse of the Torah that the Talmud suggests is one of the first thing we teach a child, which is Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe, is the verse that Moses gave us the Torah. It is an inheritance for our people. Moses went up on Mount Sinai. When Moses had the experience of the burning bush, which is this week's Torah portion, God says, go. He's out shepherding a flock. We're not sure where. But if you look at nuances of the verse, God, the verse says that go and tell Pharaoh to let my people go, take them out of their slavery, and bring them back to this mountain that we're on now, where they will serve me. Which mountain? Our history is that mountain. He was on Mount Sinai. Said, and you'll bring them back here, where you'll be able to present them with the Torah. So the Moses' mission, defining mission of liberating the Jewish people, did not end with liberating the Jewish people. It was take them out and bring them to Sinai, give them the Torah, and make them into a Jewish nation. So the Torah is the defining element of Moses' life. And we're going to wrap that all up soon. But meanwhile, we're talking about how the Torah itself is also seen as eternal because it reflects godliness. It reflects its author. So this is from the Rabbi in text 8, which is page 11. When God gave us the Torah, he liberated us from the grip of death by giving us the Torah here on earth. By giving us the Torah, he endowed us with a measure of eternality. Even as we resided in physical bodies subject to aging and decay, we would live forever free from the angel of death. Now, I wish they had brought some more, some other quotes here. What's that referring to? The Talmud tells us that when the Jews stood at Mount Sinai, and based on nuances in the verse, which we could look at if you'd like to, if I bring it up online, they were freed. The Jews standing at Mount Sinai, in receiving the Torah, were freed from death. They were given a Torah of truth, the truth of their reality shown, their souls, which are eternal, were in full blaze, and therefore death, which is part of the distortion of the world, because if God is eternal, we should be eternal, and we're created by God. That was over. I mean, let me backtrack a second also. In the original story of creation, in Genesis, God tells Adam and Eve not to eat from a specific tree. And it says, you can have anything you want in this world. There's a whole world. Go enjoy it. Don't eat from that. What does it say? For on the day you eat from that, you will die. And then, as the narrative goes, that very day, they ate. And they lived another centuries. Now, the Torah said, on the day you eat from it, you will die. And then it seems to go contradict itself because it didn't happen the day they died. They lived for centuries. What God is saying is that if you take the gift of life I've given you, and you apply it to a world I have given you, and you obfuscate that by saying it's not about what God wants of me and what that tree's purpose is. And in this case, it's not for me to eat. It's about what I want. I'm going to see the world through the veil of ego, not of why I'm needed. God says, you will have brought death to the world. You're not going to die today. You have a few centuries. But you have brought death to the world on that day. Because what you've done is you've warped the human experience. The human experience should have been seamless with God. Adam and Eve looked at each other and they saw the beauty of being alive. There was no objectification. there was no ego. There were all the layers we bring. It was a pure existence. Once they inserted, but I like that looks luscious to my eyes, which is the way the Torah describes it. They look at a fruit and say it's luscious to my eyes. It's about me, not about the purpose of God, what God created. It says then you just threw a monkey wrench into the dynamics of life. And if that's the case, the world's expression of divinity, the world's expression of its godliness gets skewed, and the expression of its godliness as immortality also gets skewed. So now all of a sudden there's death. So one of the things that the Talmud tells us is that death ceased when the Jews received the Torah. Now, what does that mean, though? So it says, when they got the Torah, we would have lived forever free from the angel of death. What does the Talmud tell us? And the Rebbe is quoting it here, but it's not his idea, it's the Talmud's idea. This came undone when we worshiped the golden calf. 40 days after we got the Torah, the Jews went into a panic. They weren't sure what to do. They didn't know where Moses was, and they worshiped the golden calf. And that reintroduced the confusion and the distortion to the world. For the Torah to imbue humans with eternality, it must be embodied in our physical experience. The sin of the golden calf introduced unholiness into our bodies, forming a barrier to holiness. This prevented the Torah from being absorbed into the body. So they had 40 days when they were free of death. But because they were free of distortion, they had the clarity of truth, they didn't receive the Torah. Then they went back into a world of untruth, of their fears and their anxieties and their ego and their passions. And then their bodies slip back into that sphere of transience.
The implication is that all of the Jews worship the golden calf, as opposed to everybody. But this condemns everybody.
That's a good question. It doesn't seem like everyone. If you're looking at the scripture there, it doesn't seem like everyone, but they were dominant. In other words, those who did kind of ruined it for everyone else, because they whether the tail was wagging the dog or the dog was wagging the tail, numbers wise, people stood by and allowed it to be. So now let's go back to Moses. Let me just thanks. Why go back to this idea of the entire home being filled with light? What is the Torah telling us about the entire home being filled with light? It's an unusual statement there about Moses' birth, which we had in text 2. So this great medieval commentary, he writes, the meaning of the text that the entire home filled with light when Moses was born, what does that mean? It means that from the time of Moses' birth, he was worthy of illuminating the entire world with the Torah he would receive at Mount Sinai. Moses was a pretty unique situation. Fundamental to Torah is that we all have free choice. That means we can choose to do good things, which makes it virtuous, or we can choose to do not good things, which makes it evil. Right? If we're forced to do good things, if we're designed by God to do good things, then what's so virtuous about it? We're just doing what we're designed to do. And the opposite is also true. So a baby is by definition neutral. They've got a whole mixed bag of personality and all, and we're going to see how things unfold as they grow, day to day, year to year. Moses, it says, it was unusual. He was born from the first moment, he had this deep connection to Torah. It doesn't mean he didn't have some free choice, but the light coming out, this great rabbi says, it means he already, as he entered the world, he already had a clear, even though he was only a baby, it was a conscious, a clear connection with Torah. That's why the home filled with light. So we'll call the immediately transparent Moses. In other words, his soul shone forth because this was the boy, the human who was going to bring the Torah, the truth to the world. And as this rabbi we already quoted, this mathematician and great rabbi, says to be consistent from every angle is the property of truth. So Moses, because Moses was a person of truth, it had to be something that from the moment he was born, it was already there. He had to actualize it more, but its truth doesn't start now. You can start tapping into a truth now, but the truth, it's beyond time. It's eternal. So Moses, in his very birth, it was shown that this is a person who is connected to Torah, because then it's not something that developed 80 years later when he gave us the Torah, but this was something that he had within him, at least at some level from birth. And actually, that's another thing we talk about Moses being the emblem of truth. Talmud tells us about a Rabbi Baruch. He said, an Arab once said to me, I will show you those who were swallowed by the earth due to the sin of Korach. In the Torah later on, when the Jews, from where we are now, the Jews in the desert, there's a rebellion by a man named Korach. And he has a few hundred Jews with him rebelling against Moses. And the Torah says that the earth opened up and swallowed them alive. That's what the Torah says. That's what Scripture says. They're gone. They're dead. Who knows? Doesn't say. Opens up, swallows, closes. Rabbi Baruch said, some Arab showed me what happened to those people. And he says, I saw two rifts in the ground. He said, listen closely. Listen to there's openings in the ground. What do you hear? I heard them calling, Moses is the truth, Torah is the truth, and we are the frauds. Because they were accusing Moses of being deceptive and lying and saying, this is all about nepotism. You put up your brother as Aaron as the high priest. You're not really telling us what God is saying. So they said, Moses is telling the truth. But they didn't want to say Moses is telling the truth. They said, Moses is the truth. Moses lived truth. And that's really what the point is here. Because Moses was so connected to Torah, Moses lived truth. He embodied truth because he embodied his own godliness and embodied the Torah. His connection to Torah brought out the eternal nature of his own godliness and soul into his body. And if you look at 12, the Medrash tells us Moses devoted his life to the Torah. Therefore, it is called his Torah. As the prophet says in Malachi, remember the Torah of my servant Moses. Torah is God's Torah, but God himself calls it Moses' Torah because of what his investment in the Torah and bringing it to us. So this helps to explain a very odd piece of Talmud. And that's text 13. The Talmud says Moses never died. Now, the Torah tells us he died. And the Torah tells us he was buried. The rabbis of the Talmud know that very well. But it says he never died. As he stood and served God then at Mount Sinai, so does he continue to stand and serve God today. What does that mean? If he's talking about the soul, no souls die. Souls continue. So what does it mean that Moses didn't die? We know his body died. He was buried. So the Rebbe dealt with this in text 14, say it doesn't mean his body. Moses' body didn't die. What it means is that Moses, because Moses is so connected to Torah, It's not only that his soul continues, which is with all of us, his bodily connection continues. How does that work? Let's look at text 14. Our sages taught that Moses never died. Because if his nature, even his physical nature, was truth, so how could his earthly presence end and die? Truth is eternal, even in the physical world. So we can explain the immortality of Moses like this. Our sages spoke of an extension of Moses in every generation. What our sages in the Zohar and the Kabbalah say is that in every generation, in the leaders of the generation, there is an extension of Moses. In other words, Moses' body has been buried and has not been living, what we call living, for thousands of years. Moses' soul continues, like my mom's soul continues, like my grandparents' soul continues. Souls continue. But Moses is also embodied to an extent in human beings, in the leaders of a generation. There's an extension of Moses in every generation. This means that Moses' soul integrates into the leaders and sages of each generation. His soul is especially present in the leading spiritual giant of the generation. For, as the Medrash tells us, there's someone like Moses in every generation. Not there, each generation has its Moses. The soul of Moses integrates into the body of this leader. So that's about Moses. What's it trying to tell us? What it's trying to tell us is the more we apply ourselves to Torah, which can mean going on Chabad.org or Aish, whatever, and making a point every day to say, I want to study some of God's Torah. Not only because it's interesting to me, because I'm a Jew and this is nourishment for my soul and I want to connect with truth. The more we connect with truth, the more we connect with our own immortality. Moses is an incredible example of that, where we say that, in a sense, he never really died. For us, immortality may be plan A, but have a plan B. But our own immortality of the soul and our immortality as a people is connected to our connection with Torah. And just a simple example of how we connect with Torah, there is a law that when if my teacher, from my Torah teacher, from kindergarten, walks into this room, I am supposed to stand up for him or her, right? We've had teachers. Now, why is that? It's because when they came in, the Torah they taught me comes in one time, and I have to respect that. And look at text 15. The Talmud says, does the Torah belong to the teacher? This is a human being. So she taught me that 55 years ago. But just who knows where, I don't know if any of my teachers are walking in here so fast, but there's a person with a lot of different things of life. So she told me something. So what? Does it belong to the teacher? Is that so much embodied? This rabbi of the Talmud said, yes, the Torah belongs to the teacher, as it is written, and he studies his Torah day and night. So this is something we apply ourselves to it becomes ours. And the more as not only as individuals, but as a people, our connection to the Torah, our immortality, we can definitely do whatever we can with diplomacy and charities and APAC and fight against Jew hatred. The spiritual secret of our immortality, to answer Mark Twain's question, what is the secret of the Jews' immortality? Is the Torah. And we have to, it says when Torah becomes our primary application, we become Torah, Torah becomes us. So let's look at the key points. Page 17. Truth is eternal and unchanging. What is true today was and will always be true. What is true here is true everywhere. What is true for one is true for all. Number two, only God and his Torah are entirely true. Everything else is subject to change and therefore false. Falsehood has no power over truth. Thus, no nation has power over us when we embrace the Torah. Number three, when you embrace the Torah, we absorb a measure of externality and become the eternal nation, but only if we study it in a way that is fully true. Number four, For us to be absorbed in the Torah and the Torah absorbed in us, it must become our highest priority. We must turn to it morning and night, and whenever we can, snatch a moment in between. And number 5, this is especially critical at times of war when we are attacked by our enemies. At such times, we must endure that Jewish students are constantly studying Torah and that we study Torah every moment we can. When we absorb the Torah's eternality, we become the eternal nation that never fears and is never vanquished. I'm sorry? I think so too.
Means that if you know the Torah, live by the Torah, that means every Jew can be saved.
Nope.
Because even though that said, if you kill a man, I just man to kill a nation.
Yeah.
Even though he said he was trying to say Sodom and Gomorrah, so even though you give me one, I will save you. That's
Right.
the difference.
Now, Leon asked a good question, which I was actually going to bring up. Is there an assertion by the Rebbe that no one in the entire world did not die for 40 days at that point in time? It wouldn't have been for everyone. That was for the people who accepted the Torah, and it's not his assertion; it's the Talmud's assertion. So the logical understanding of that piece of Talmud is that no one in the Jewish camp died for those 40 days.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yes.
What about the people that follow the golden calf,
Well, once they involved the golden calf, everything went south.
and they died in this moment?
I don't know if that moment, but death was brought back to the world.
They were following the
Wish everyone a great week.
Thank you,
See you next week,
Rabbi.
God willing.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.